Hi, everybody. I'm Jeff Damaris, and welcome to episode 2 of The Revolutionaries. Tina Duryea and Shannon Riley will be with us in a few minutes. I just wanted to open the episode telling you what this one's going to be about. We're going to be talking about progressives, posers, and Platner. And that's the theme of the episode. Basically, we're going to be talking about how the progressive movement in the United States right now, its current situation, how there are people out there that are taking advantage of people that want substantive change and posing themselves as change agents only to walk in and be the same old, or not exactly what they advertise themselves to be. And the difficulties in vetting people. It seems, at least anyway, that there are difficulties in vetting proper candidates to fill these spots just on the promise of being change agents without knowing whether or not they actually will be. And that's sort of the Graham Platner issue, where Platner's very, very murky history did not stop him from getting the nomination until after he was nominated in the primary officially, and only then did further things come up. But why wasn't he flagged before then? Situations like John Fetterman, for example, as well, who advertised himself as a progressive and has since been a frequent fixture on Fox News. So this is what we're trying to get at, try to find out where the truth of this movement is, and really, how important it is. The progressive movement has been in the United States since for a very long time, since the Theodore Roosevelt administration, but even stretching back further than that. And so we're going to be talking about that. A little note, I have obviously the remnants of a head cold, so I've sound a little stuffy. So I apologize in advance of that. And the other thing I apologize for is we had some issues with our center cam during the recording of the actual show. So it's looks a little different than the other camera angles do, but we did figure it out eventually, but it was unfortunately too late for the recording. So if you're listening to this on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your audio podcasts, the center camera issue doesn't mean anything. But for those of you watching on YouTube or watching on Facebook or what have you, you'll notice it. But we resolved it, so the next episode will look better. And like I said, we're still finding our way through a lot of the technical stuff of this. All of us, none of us are professional podcasters. We're just regular citizens that are interested in making a positive change in the world and getting the message of that change out and talking about refounding our country. So enjoy the episode. A lot of great conversation throughout, and we'll see you in a moment. Welcome to the Revolutionaries. This is our second episode. Today we're going to be discussing the progressive movement a little more, particularly in light of the recent developments in the news. This includes what happened with Graham Platner last weekend. And I think really discussion is going to be about the certain vulnerabilities within the progressive movement. And that is people that pretend to be progressives and turn out maybe they're not quite as progressive as they have advertised themselves. And so I think this is really a discussion on the health of the movement overall, and sort of observations about what's happened over recent times. Tina and Shannon are here, of course, and so we'll get obviously their opinions on this as well. So let's just start kind of the discussion right away. You'll have to excuse me. I have to put my readers on here so I can actually see the words I have written in front of me. I think one of the things that we'd want to talk about here is, firstly, what has progressivism done over, the history of the movement, if you will, not just in recent history, but in the history of the country. If you look back Teddy Roosevelt, who was an idol of a lot of people on the right, was a progressive of his time.
Of his time, yeah.
You know, so a lot of laws, a lot of protections for workers started during Teddy Roosevelt administration, and then it continued into the Woodrow Wilson administration. So, what are your thoughts on what progressivism has meant to us here in America historically, and why it's such an important movement to keep going?
Well, I mean, I think that one of the things that, you mentioned Teddy Roosevelt, and, we think about FDR and, all these sort of progressive movements, and you're naming like people, leaders who are champion progressive causes, but I really actually think it comes from the bottom up. And then there's people who take advantage of a groundswell of movement in order to, capitalize on it. Right. And so maybe the real leaders of the progressive movement are not, people whose names we know, but the people who in mass just said, hey, we've had enough.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I think of like the civil rights movement. I think of, but like, I mean, it is the common people. Right. It's like when the citizens come together and say that, what's happening is not good for us. And, we're going to throw out what wasn't working and, demand what we actually need. I think that's kind of where like the progressive movement is. Like, it's not like it's the root word progress, trying to make it so that like we're moving the country forward. I actually saw like a bumper sticker on my way here this morning, and it was like, we the people demand a more perfect union. Like that is kind of, and like after listening to like last episode, like later I was like, we have to remember that like that Constitution is a living, breathing document. Like it's not just words on a page. It's something that is supposed to be, grow with the country, grow with the people, like change and, be what is needed at that time. So I agree. That's my little.
I mean, I read Howard Zinn's book, People's History of the United States, and it very much echoes those sentiments. It's like, this is not the history of the country is not just of the quote unquote great man type thing, where you had, as you mentioned, the presidents themselves. We mentioned that and that's all kind of how we always associate it. Well, it was during this president's presidency that X happened, and this president's presidency that Y happened. Yeah. But it was these movements, particularly labor movements, that were so vital in moving the needle, which kind of makes it so, it's so ironic, I guess, that today, while a lot of the labor unions leadership is still votes Democratic or supports Democratic candidates, there are a lot of rank and file members of unions that don't, that gravitated toward MAGA. And the questions I've always wondered was, and this is something that I reflect upon a lot, probably to an unhealthy degree, I'll admit, as to why that happened. Because if you look at a lot, I know, because I've spent time on in elections, door knocking, talking to people, having events and talking to people of different political persuasions. Yeah. And when I talk to a lot of union members, rank and file union members, a lot of them are very supportive of Trump. Not all of them, but a lot of them are. And the question always comes is, well, why would a person who's working class, a union person, support a guy who is the antithesis of all of that, who is, was born with a silver spoon in his mouth and has no respect for what working people do. As a matter of fact, in a lot of cases, he doesn't honor his contracts, and he, doesn't pay his contractors, and a lot of those are unionized contractors, right? So, like, how could that happen?
I can think of two reasons.
I mean,
yeah. Yeah, I think there's probably, go ahead.
There's a couple, like, I mean, first I'm going to like say like the disillusionment with the establishment of like the Democratic Party. We have positioned ourselves as like the big tent kind of party, but we lack focus when it comes to actually listening to the people that we're fighting for. A lot of the times, like, we go in there and just, it's like, oh, well, we know what's right or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Just my personal feelings is that like the Democratic Party is what the Republican Party was when I was a kid, where like growing up, like kind of like that, where it's like, oh, you know, we know what's best, but like we're going to lean into capitalism. We're going to lean into, for the people, and like that we're going to bring you in these jobs. But the corporations that they're bringing in have bad policies for workers. Like if you think about Amazon treats their workers like crap. I can't even tell you like how many stories I've heard of people, having heart attacks, and like the rest of the people there are just told to like walk around them.
Right.
Like just keep going, like because you can't stop. And while, bringing Amazon to Connecticut, created jobs, but like, did we create good quality jobs, or did these larger corporations, like where it sounds like did we just fill a job placement that wasn't actually, taking into account like workers' rights, like healthcare, like job satisfaction, those types of things, like and I totally understand where like a regular guy who or woman or them sits there and goes, you really haven't done anything for me.
But then you have the Republican Party, which is basically, Amazon is donating to the Republican Party. All of these big companies are completely in bed with the Republicans. So I don't think it's actually that Democrats are too friendly with, these big corporations. I think, I hate to say it, it comes down to something really basic, which is racism and sexism. And I think that what happens is you have union workers who, Trump appeals to them, and the MAGA ethos of, we're anti-woke and we're not afraid to say it, and we're going to give everyone permission to be anti-woke, kind of trumps the whole concept of, workers' rights, maybe because they don't see that workers' rights are being affected by politics, and that's where the Democrats fail. But I mean, the narrative that, the Democrats are too tight with Amazon as an example, when you have Amazon completely in bed with the Republican Party, for me, I think it's more simple. I think it's racism and sexism. And then you have the union leadership, when they do support Democrats, they support, establishment Democrats who are going to give them, who are going to make deals with them. So that's just what I see.
I mean, I having known some people in unions, we have, unions are run the gamut. There's a lot of different types of unions.
That's very
there's
accurate.
Trade unions, and there's professional unions. There's all different types. And I've always been I've been a strong advocate for unionization, for a lot of different industries that don't currently have it. I think that there are elements within unions, as you say, that racism and sexism plays a role. I don't know what degree it does, and to how widespread that is. I think that they're certainly there in certain unions and certain professions, perhaps, based on historical scenarios with that. But I think a lot of times that comes from successful propagandization and scapegoating. If you're going to say, well, my father was a this, okay, and was a union person and did this job and was a professional, whatever it might be, plumbing union or pipe fitters or whatever. Some it doesn't matter what it is. And he did X. He made X. He had these kind of protections. He was able to buy a house and raise a kid and blah 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 blah. And we know the whole story. And now the son. And again, a lot of the times it is a gender scenario with it. A lot of it are men, and they can't do what their fathers did.
No.
But rather than finding out where that the responsibility for that sort of thing is, why that is the way it is, instead it gets sort of scapegoated around. And I think what the difference between now and say the old progressive movement, which really made progress right through, I would say, I mean, when you're talking about the progressive movement, you can talk about movement right through the 60s, you know, starting at the beginning of the century with some ebb and flows along the way, but getting you to around the 60s and the early 70s. What they were doing was they had people who were advocating for a robust middle class. A lot of the discussions were on economic factors, but as we saw over time, those economic factors, those economic positions that they had, you began to see other social movements strengthen as a result of that. So, for example, the civil rights movement, as time went on, as you went through the era of the New Deal, through the Depression, through the war, and we get into the 50s, and the middle class begins to grow, suddenly now the civil rights movement becomes more robust. It becomes has more strength potential. Now, I do think that these things do connect in certain ways.
I also think there's a conflict between them as well.
Explain, if you could. That's okay. Yes.
I think
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think that there's a perception that they are in conflict because some of the things that are considered progressive movements don't take into account, you know, what we're going to talk social issues and civil rights issues. And I think that maybe if you have, we'll just say, you know, civil rights issues versus economic issues, the feeling is that the government can't focus on both at the same time.
Yeah.
And so if we make progress on one, it's seen at being at the expense of the other and vice versa.
Right.
And so you have this constant tension, which is, and I don't think that it should be that way. And I don't think it is that way, but the perception is that you cannot do both. And so there's sort of a push and pull between the two.
Yeah.
It's always the wait your turn kind of conversation where, you know, we talk about intersectionality or whatever, like all of us, like what's bad for like a certain demographic of people is also bad for another demographic of people, but it might not be as visible.
Right.
And like when you improve the quality of life for one demographic, you actually improve the quality of life for all demographics. I think of like that shirt, like where it's quality isn't pie. Like it's not like that you could, you know, taking one piece and giving it to somebody else, like makes it so, you know, you're not losing anything by giving power to someone else.
But is that really accurate? Because if you have a straight white man who has a big leg up on society, you know, he starts off, the playing field isn't level. So he starts up here and we're here. And then, you know, people of color down here. So if we come up here, then he doesn't have that advantage anymore. And so he actually does feel like he's losing his advantage. And so he's getting a smaller piece of the pie in his mind.
Well, as a white guy,
it's like, yeah, Jeff, this straight white guy right here.
So now I recognize the fact that indeed, you know, straight white men in American society have advantages. We do. And I think those advantages are based on, you know, a lot of structural flaws in our society. And I don't think they should exist. And I don't believe personally. Yeah. Okay. I don't personally believe that if someone is getting an opportunity, it's not at my expense, because for me, I should have the same opportunities in an overall sense as anybody else, and vice versa. And I know that there are a lot of white men, straight white men particularly, that I know that feel that way. But I know that obviously there are a number that do not feel that way. And, when we look at...
And their mothers.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
And their wives.
Yes. And I mean, you can see that in a lot of the election results. That was where does Trump's appeal come from? It comes from a lot of those things. The feeling that, well, if someone else gets a leg up, that means I'm getting laid down. If my father used to make this much money doing this same thing that I'm doing now, I can't do what he used to do, so it must be somebody else's fault. But that somebody else has got to be somebody who's taking those opportunities away from me. Not really looking at where those opportunities are being taken away from. It's looking at, well, someone else has the chance to do it. Now that should have been my chance. And I think that when we look at the progressive movement throughout time, as you mentioned, it's an economic movement first. Originally it was based on economics, based on people's labor rights and things like that. I think that, as you say, there seems to be conflict between these two things. And I think the sort of point would be that as we move forward, we have to remove that conflict. We have to say these things are connected. I think that message has been a message that's been given out by progressives in recent years. To a certain extent, I mean, say AOC, for example, gives out that message. Not all of them. I mean, we know that there's some prominent ones that we'll be discussing in a few minutes that, perhaps weren't as advertised. And so one of the things that we're going to be discussing when we come back is the current class of progressives and where we kind of sit right now, and how some of them, as I said, may not have been the perfect messengers for what we're trying to do. So anyway, we'll be back in just 1 minute. All right, we're back. So the progressive movement today, okay, when we talk about progressive, a lot of people get the connotation that progressive is, well, they'll call it right now far left. You hear this coming from media sources. They'll say, so-and-so, the far left mayor of New York City. Okay, so Mamdani, the far left mayor of New York City. Okay, whatever. All right. Look, he's not far left. Okay, far left is, Lenin. Okay, I mean Vladimir Lenin, not John Lennon. Okay, so that's far left. Okay, That's not what we're talking about here. We're not talking about owning the means of production kind of stuff. We're talking about people that are progressives. That means that they are looking for a better future. Believe that government can help promote that better future. Believe in economic fairness and economic justice, as well as social justice. That's what they're talking about. And in a society that values the status quo, which feeds corporate oligarchy, you want to scare that away. You don't want that, so you can call it far left and use all sorts of terms. I will say, and I'll see if my co-hosts agree, and we talked a little bit in the last episode, but I will say that using the term democratic socialist, to me, as a person who's a little aware of PR stuff, is playing into the hands of those who kind of scare the rest of the public and say, oh, you don't want to vote for a democratic socialist because they're socialists. And democratic socialists will say, we're not socialists, we're democratic socialists. And the average person out there is going to go, what the hell are you talking about? Yeah. So let's first discuss that part of it, okay, before we get to the personalities and everything.
I think it kind of plays to the part of people on the left are often accused of being elitist, and by using large words and complex, talking about things in a complex way, that makes it harder for people to understand on an everyday basis. I read an article in the New York Post of all things. I never read the New York Post. I'm a New York Times girl. But the New York Post actually put out an article about trad wives. And it was actually saying you only see trad wives when they're in their 20s, because by the time they're in their late 30s, they've been given the heave-ho and their lives are miserable. So when the right is pushing trad wives, they're pushing these young, beautiful women who are having this wonderful life. Yeah. And so I actually read this article in the New York Post of all things, and it was like fourth grade reading level. It was really simplistic, but and they were, criticizing the trad wife movement. So I was like, wow, this is something I want to read about. And I was just shocked by how much lower a reading level it was than the stuff I normally read. But that is what the average voter wants to read. Whether they're smart or not, they still want to read something that's really simple and basic. So when we talk about going back to the word democratic socialist, and then we're just like, oh, well, that's not what we mean. It's like we've lost everybody right from the start.
Right.
And so that's to what your point was, is like, that's why I agree with you that we fall into their traps by arguing about what is a democratic socialist, as opposed to saying, hey, we're Democrats and we want to do things that are socially beneficial to everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think you could even put it as, if you want to describe yourself and say, I don't want to describe myself as a party member. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's say you're taking somebody who's not really so much active in elective politics or, getting candidates elected, but is more, think of it as a philosophical experiment or something. And they say, well, I'm I'm a conservative. So you never hear anybody. Okay. And this is, I've noticed this for a long time. I'm sure you guys have noticed this too. I'm sure you have noticed this too. Nobody, and I mean nobody, who is a conservative has an issue calling themselves a conservative. They'll come right out and say, I'm a conservative. Like, they have no problem with it. Okay. If you're a liberal, okay, or progressive, and liberal was the term that was demonized first. Rush Limbaugh would go on his show and goes, those liberals, they're liberally, all this sort of like horrible shit, like as if it might have been, as if you were a liberal, that meant that you wanted to bring Satan upon the earth and burn everything down. Okay. And it was successful to the point where suddenly now people had to start pivoting and use the phrase progressive to really describe more or less the same thing, but
without
trying to clean up the word a bit, whatever. Well, then that got kicked in with the same thing: liberal, progressive, liberal, progressive, liberal, progressive, and then the Democratic Socialist moniker happened, and so now there's the Democratic Socialists of America, okay, which is the organizational hub for democratic socialists. Now, we talked in the last episode about democratic socialism and what it really was, okay? And if you called it by what it really was, I think a lot of people who have an adverse reaction to it wouldn't if they knew what it really stood for, okay? But as soon as they hear it, as we say, as soon as they hear the term, boom, that's it. Boom, they close it off. They don't want to hear it. But DSA is not the philosophical perspective of democratic socialism. It's the organizational portion, okay? Democratic Socialists of America. And they endorse people. I'm not quite sure their vetting process is all that significant or wonderful. I could see it. I don't know if you noticed this at home, but I can see Tina's ready to say something.
No, I was
good. Tina's just listening.
I'm listening.
Okay. All right, go. You guys go. You could talk over me. Go for it.
No, I mean, I was thinking about it, like, on the way up here, knowing that we were going to be talking about, like, the vetting process and everything like that. And I think about
or the lack of one.
The lack of one. Well, like, I mean, as a DTC chair, like, the Connecticut Democratic, like, state party has tried to help us find candidates. And I'm like, you probably too have encountered this, where it's like they use another company that sends out a text message to registered Dems in the area that might have like a certain voting record of like, on a level. And it's like, a generic have you thought about running for office kind of thing? And then like,
I got
if
that
they
text,
respond, yeah, I got that text too. And I was like,
I don't get those texts. Why don't I get those texts?
I'm the DTC chair.
Yeah.
Like but then they collect that data, and then like they handed that data over to me, and I was supposed to call like the 27 people that they gave me a list that I could find someone to run in our municipal elections. And like, we did get like a couple of quality people from like that list, but I still had to do the legwork. I still had to sit and interview these people, and also like, Google them and see like, is there anything in their background that might, make them not an ideal candidate to run for office? But it's like, it's really hard to find people to run for office.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. People don't realize how hard it is.
No,
yes, it's very hard.
And you'll find someone and you'll look at them and be like, oh my God, like this person's awesome. Like, I love like, talking to them, et cetera, blah, 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 blah. And then you go and you look in their background and it's like, damn it.
Yeah.
Damn it. But if there's not someone who's doing that for you, or you're not spot checking that, like you don't know what's going to happen with that candidate. Like you might, have done the first pass. This person like was great, and like you didn't dig deeper, or you didn't know to dig in a certain way or something like that. Right. And then then it comes out later that, oh, they're a really horrible person. Like their politics.
They have a Nazi tattoo on their chest.
Ooh, good Lord.
Yeah. I thought what Josh Elliott said actually about Graham Platner was very interesting, because he said this is kind of why you don't want to have someone who's never run for something as high as Senate, because like if you make a mistake on the municipal election level, or even as a state rep, it comes out in the first term probably, and then you can be like, you can course correct.
Yeah.
But when you're running someone for the Senate and they've already had their primary, it's sort of like, it's kind of too late. It's not too late, but it makes a much bigger issue. Whereas, again, if this had happened at the state rep level, like if Graham Platner had run for state rep and it had come out, he would never have progressed to the Senate. And so you shouldn't be having people running for Senate, governor, president, unless they've held office before.
Well, we've all seen, and I'm sure you've seen the video. We'll just go to Platner for a minute here, I guess. Of the team, the duo, whatever, that vetted him, and
laughing.
Yeah, she's giggling, and he's got a vocal fry that I swear I thought was going to just pierce my eardrums.
Yeah,
and it was like a joke to them.
The deeply unserious people.
Yes, very, very. Yeah. And these people are making key decisions. To get information to voters for key positions for, U.S. Senate. And that's, beyond the fact that they aren't serious, how in the hell they got to a position like that to be able to do that? And again, that's a DSA issue too.
I know they got that because there are not people that are willing to do this work. So anybody who steps up, who's like, okay, yeah, no, I can totally do that work for you. I will look for candidates. You're like, yeah, I will take that help.
Yeah.
Because we're all volunteers.
Yes.
But this is, and I think there's two ways to look at that. The people looking for the electable officials are generally volunteers. They're not getting paid to do this, but they don't always have help. When you think about it, the people that are on a DTC or on an RTC, they're just regular people, and they're elected to these positions by, the Democrats or Republicans in their town. But whether or not they're able to do the actual work once they're there, we all know that there's people that show up and they just want to talk and tell you what you're doing wrong, but they don't actually want to step up and help you do those things. So when you find enthusiastic college students that are I'm studying poli-sci and I want to help, the local DTC. You're like, yes, thank God.
Yeah.
Because college kids have time, they have energy,
they don't have bills or rent or anything like that.
Exactly. Or actual jobs and children, etc. So you're like, great, that's help. But you have to remember that these are still children.
Yeah.
That their, prefrontal cortex is not, fully developed, that they don't have the experience of,
juggling things,
mm-hmm. Or they don't think about how your social media footprint follows you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that we have really taught our children that what you say on the internet follows you everywhere. And it's if they looked at those Reddit posts and were just he's a weird guy, says some weird stuff.
Weird.
He would never probably say that in public or whatever, but that's a pretty serious thing. You do have to think about because what you say on the internet is generally a lot freer than what you would say in public, because there's not that social kind of I guess I don't know if I want to say contract or barrier, where it's you have that momentary filter where it's oh God, if I said this out loud, that would be really, really bad. These are inside thoughts, not outside thoughts. Whereas you go on Reddit or you go on Facebook,
people just say whatever.
All those inside thoughts come out.
All you got to do is go to a local Facebook page anywhere. I don't care where you live. You can live anywhere, and you look at your local Facebook page
or next door.
And the comments are just. I mean, some of the people say this. I had one person that I knew, on my local Facebook page. And they were in a discussion about I forget what it was, but somehow slavery came up, and this person said that, well, actually, now this is not going in the right direction, right? Yeah. Okay, well, actually, slavery was beneficial for the slaves in a lot of ways, because they had their they were taught certain skills, and I remember
it's a MAGA talking point.
Yeah, exactly. I remember hearing that talking point around that same time, and I thought to myself, "Am I in the fucking Twilight Zone? The people are actually online with their names attached to it now, saying something that incredibly stupid and ignorant, but people do it." Because, as you say, online, people seem to have a little bit more, I don't want to say courage. That's not really what it is.
Yeah, they have less discretion. I was thinking, though, in terms of I'm thinking hypothetically of Graham Platner and how he became the nominee.
Yeah.
And then I think, we have, a senator in Connecticut who's senior, and he's probably not going to be around for, forever. And there are conversations we have in the Democratic Party about who would be our next senator. And I think about, I think we could all probably come up with about 5 names without even thinking about it, who would be in contention. And I'm sure Maine had a similar thing. They had Janet Mills, they had Shannon Bellows, they had a ton of people who could theoretically step up to the Senate seat. And instead you had this outside consulting group who came in and kind of handpicked this person and created him to a the fact that they're oh, he's an oyster farmer. He's not an oyster farmer. And so, I imagine if this were to happen here in Connecticut, how weird it would be for us who are engaged in the policy, in the politics of Connecticut, if we were having a Senate race and we were, looking at, William Tong is one of our candidates, and, maybe Jahana Hayes, I don't think she wants it, but let's just throw a couple names out there, right? So, we come up with, a bunch of people who might want to be senator, and then all of a sudden say, this company comes in out of nowhere and plucks up somebody from, just
nowhere,
random, who had no experience in politics, and they just, but they were charming in a weird way, and they appealed to people in a weird way, and that person became the nominee. To me, it's an unfathomable idea.
So what did this guy look like? If you look
Graham
at
Platner looks like he was rode hard and put away wet.
Yeah, he looks they literally said it. They were like, he looks like typical Maine guy. Like
he's 41 years old and he looks much older and he looks like
oh shit.
And he looks like a walking red flag.
Folks, if you can, please tell me that Graham Platner looks older than I do. Okay? Please. Okay. I don't want to say that I got 9 years on him, but like, yeah, he does. He looks like he's my age or older.
He looks rough.
Yeah. And look, that's
fine.
That's fine. That's fine. Not everybody ages in the same way. Okay. But he's got the whole walrus look, which I guess is appealing to somebody. But, you know, it's more along the lines that you have him, and then but he is the latest of this trend where you had John Fetterman, who was promoted by progressives and very strongly supported by progressives. Bernie Sanders stood with him. Bernie Sanders stood with Tulsi Gabbard too. Bernie Sanders stood with Graham Platner too. Okay. But Fetterman is turning out like he's on Fox News more than Sean Hannity is. Okay. So where's this guy? You know, what's going on here? I mean, I know he had health issues and had a stroke and all that stuff. And so who knows if that had anything to do with what he's done. But I'm not willing to say that's it. I mean, there has to be more than, okay, he had a stroke and that it affected some of his cognitive skills, whatever. How about he just, you know, was not what he pretended to be?
Okay, let's go back to the whole the tension between civil rights versus economic rights.
Yeah.
During the primary for the Senate in Pennsylvania, there was a guy named Connor Lamb. There was also Malcolm Kenyatta, and there was John Fetterman.
Yeah.
And John Fetterman, as mayor, I believe it was, he chased after a black man with a shotgun. And if you were on Twitter, if you're on Black Twitter during the primary, every single black person on there was like, this guy is a racist. Why are we promoting him? Yeah. And they did the same thing with Graham Platner. And they said, this guy's got a Nazi tattoo and he's got a Reddit history that's very problematic. Why are the progressives supporting him? And that's where that distrust comes in, is that it's not that, you know, underrepresented communities don't like these policies. They dislike the fact that their interests are subjugated to this policy idea.
Yes.
I think.
Yeah. I also think that there is something more surface level too, particularly when it comes to Fetterman and Platner, is that they both, by appearance, they're both white men. They're both gruff, tough-looking white guys to try to appeal to potentially a certain demographic that they don't think somebody
white working class.
Just
call it what it is.
White working class, right? They're trying to give that sort of thing. And my whole thing has been this, okay? White working class people, whether it's men, women, and in fact, I think working class people across the board, what they're starving for, and what they've been really looking for, is people that are sending messages to talk to them about how to improve their lives. But I think there's, as you say, there's a subset of them that are looking to why their lives or why their situations are where they are, and they're pointing their fingers at people of color, or they're pointing their fingers at whatever scapegoat group that Fox News has been projecting. Okay, and there's enough of them to consider. But I think if we're really moving the progressive movement forward, we have to marry these two issues. We have to find a way where we're reaching out to people that normally would say, well, you know, I'm a working class person. Okay, it doesn't matter. Like I said, regardless of whatever the other scenarios are, just working class person. I need someone that says, they are going to help me. They are listening to what I'm saying, and start to find ways to communicate with people to bring them together. Now, this ain't going to be easy because none of this stuff is easy. But I think if you don't start trying, and if you don't make an overt attempt to do it, even if it doesn't work, we're going to continue to have this pendulum swing between going from, you know, a Democratic president for 4 years to a MAGA president for 4 years. And each time that MAGA turn takes its swing, it creates a lot of long-term damage across the board to institutions, to the government. And my feeling is, and as I've said to you guys before, and it's been a point I've been making, is that if we're really serious about refounding, it has to be not just a political refounding. It has to be something that's deeper than that.
Yeah.
And I don't think you get there. And like I said, it's not a project that lasts 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years. I mean, takes time, but it's got to start. And so that's my feeling on it, is that that's where I think the future of the progressive movement is. Bernie Sanders is 84 years old or whatever. Your observations on Bernie Sanders are interesting. Give everybody a little bit of your view on.
I mean, like, it's basically what I was saying, which is that there's this perception, at least among a lot of people, that Bernie Sanders, first of all, he's not one. He is a kind of the poster child for white flight. He went from New York City and Chicago to Vermont, the whitest state ever. His first job out of college was when he was 40. He became mayor. As senator, he's passed like 2 bills. So if you want to make progress and be progressive, you also have to pass legislation. Yeah. And that means you have to be effective. And unfortunately, that means you do actually have to compromise, because we were in a democracy. You can't just kind of come in there and say, I'm going to do by executive order as a senator. Like, the president has executive order, senators don't. And so you have this perception that Bernie Sanders was this highly ineffective senator who was already sketchy because of, the white flight thing to Vermont and the lack of a job before he was 40. And then he comes in and he sort of, he's running against the first woman ever to run for president. And, he's just speaking exclusively almost to economic issues and not really talking about women's issues. He calls Planned Parenthood the establishment. I mean, he's very a lot of his talking points were dismissive of what I'm going to call social justice issues. And so that's where the problem, going back to that tension between, civil rights and progressive movement, is the beginning. A lot of that tension comes from Bernie Sanders sort of setting up the progressive movement to look like it doesn't care about social justice issues.
Now, this isn't to say that I don't love Burlington, Vermont. I got married there. My father's from there.
Yeah.
But a lot of what you're saying is correct. I mean, if you look at a long legislative career that Bernie Sanders has had, but very, very little to show for that time there, I think there's certain value that what Bernie Sanders brings to the table is to highlight those economic concerns, which is great. But as you say, it seems oftentimes to be the exclusion of other issues that really are intertwined. Because when people talk about social justice, a lot of times we begin to look at it as it's a lot of it's either racial or gender-based or different,
LGBTQ.
But it is also class-based. And there are people that don't get opportunities in different communities in our country because of they're looked down upon as poor. They're poor. You're a poor person. But I think where Bernie Sanders missed, I mean, his history notwithstanding, his lack of success in legislature notwithstanding, you could still come up and be a leader of a movement, somebody that galvanizes people together without having to be a senator. You can be, we've had people in our history that have done that.
Cesar Chavez.
Yeah. Or Martin Luther King.
Which is, again, another problematic person.
Yes, that's true. But if you look at by the connective tissue of social justice and economic justice, they are intertwined completely.
Yes.
And that is where I think the whole point of this is that when you have Platners or Fettermans or people that are extremely flawed, they're talking only on economic issues. They're trying to get white working men in particular into the voting booth to vote for them. And instead of talking about the broader range of issues that affect everybody, healthcare is an economic issue, yes, but healthcare is also a social justice issue, because there are a lot of people who are not white working class or white people in general who have it even tougher in dealing with affordability and accessibility in healthcare. So this is also important to be able to to make those connections for all of us. Go ahead.
You were talking about how do we marry social justice issues and economic issues. Yeah. And I have a very simple solution, which instead of having the movement being driven by straight white men, you have the movement be driven by women and people of color. That would probably solve a lot of the economic issues. Is a different language than somebody who's not. And I think that if we amplify those or lift those voices up and really listen to people, like I go back to Platner, when that Nazi tattoo came out, every single Black person that I follow on social media was like, hell no. And people were like, full speed ahead. Yeah. We're not going to why did it have to come down to the, multiple allegations of sexual assault against white women before people actually took his problematic behavior seriously? Right. It should have been over in October for him. That people were like, oh, we'll find it. We'll brush that aside.
I don't want to be in the uncomfortable position of defending white men and their terrible behaviors, because there are many instances of that. But I do want to say that I think that men, again, I'm a white man, so I think that people like myself who believe that elevating all voices is important, all voices that are there to elevate others. Okay, so I should be clear. I don't believe in elevating voices that believe in taking people down or knocking people down. That I think that a truly pluralistic society, one that is progressive, that is conscious of all of its members and the different issues that all of us face, the different needs, the different challenges, and to find ways to improve our overall society. I think it requires everybody. I think it's an all hands on deck type thing. Yep. And I think that if a voice is a white male or a Black woman or anybody, so I'm using two examples, but just this really means anybody, that if the voice is a good voice, if the voice is giving strength, it serves a good role in our society and to make these changes. Because in order to overcome the real, let's say, enemy, which is the corporate oligarchy that dominates the country and is going to end up bankrupting our children and grandchildren and making life much more difficult for everybody. In order to really handle this situation, we're going to need people of good conscience and of a belief in each other. So that's where I come with it. That's what I think refounding is. When I talk about that, is not just about refounding the country as a political entity or whatever. It's really for lack of a better term, spiritual. That's not religious, but spiritual renewal. Like, say, we have to refine who we are and refound who we are as a society. And that means getting rid of a lot of the prejudices and a lot of the, not a lot of them, all of the prejudices that we have set up over our history, and to overcome them. And it will take time, but I think that's, this is one little step in that direction. That's my feeling on it. Well, I guess we could wrap there, unless you guys have anything else.
I don't know. I mean, I'm sitting here and I'm kind of, I guess, thinking about it, like, as we were talking about, like, intersectionality and how, like, you have to listen to, like, all the voices. Like, a really interesting thing has happened since the Trump administration has gotten rid of DEI. White men are having trouble getting into colleges because they did away with all the DEI and, like, affirmative action. The quotas.
Okay.
At, like, Ivy Leagues and all of these other things. So now students of color are going into more of, like, these state and community colleges, which then are excluding now the ability for, I don't want to say this, like not mediocre white men, but like regular, average Joe, like students that like maybe don't have like the greatest performance thing, but like would, normally get into these colleges, are not getting into these colleges because students of color are, maybe a little bit, have like a better resume. And this is the college that they can afford. Whereas before, because they had like these amazing grades or whatever, like they were getting into like colleges on scholarships and stuff like that. And now, it's affecting the, white male population where like.
So you mean that MAGA's racism is backfiring on them?
I mean,
basically,
yes, that's
at least on the education
on the
level.
education level.
Yeah. I mean, we know that like in terms of hiring, I believe Black women have had the biggest layoffs of the federal government. Yeah. So, but for college, that's an interesting backfiring.
Yeah. And I don't even know, like, right. Like, I'm sitting here and I'm also thinking about like, women's suffrage. When we were fighting for like the right to vote, Black women were part of that movement. But then when they brought up like their concerns or like, what about us? Like the establishment of suffrage said, no, wait your turn. We can't make this about race too. It just has to be about gender. Like you have to wait. And like, Black women were excluded from the right to vote. So I don't know.
We have to be careful not to do that and make those same types of mistakes.
Yeah, it's like we can't minimize those sort of concerns. Yeah,
concerns. Yeah.
Right.
So you can have a white man or like a white person as a leadership role, but it's who you surround yourself with and who you're listening to. And like, if you are going to like, you can't just pick and choose which voices you're amplifying. Like you have to bring everybody up with you.
Right. And I think that like, I like what you're saying. And it reminded me of also, there's sort of a narrative that we're in such a crisis right now that we can't also, like we can sort of throw certain groups underneath the bus. I'm not going to label them because I think we all know which groups are. But like, okay, so we have to focus on winning these elections. So we'll throw these people under the bus, and that we just can't do that. I mean,
I think if you really are trying to move the needle, I mean, when you, like I said, it's one of those things when you talk to people individually. You get them off of, their local Facebook page and you get them off of, away from Fox News or whatever. There's a lot more, they're a lot more reasonable and a one-on-one, maybe from, as you say, that they're a little more, reluctant to be their true selves. But, it's a starting point with a conversation with those folks. But yeah, I think it's something where, if you're going to be saying, look, wait your turn. I mean, when does that turn come up? Okay, now that you've accomplished, but now your allies have gotten what they wanted and they've said, wait your turn. Well, your allies are going to be there to make sure your turn comes. I mean, that's not what has happened. So, well, anyway, so that's the show for this week. So we'll be back again next week with another episode of The Revolutionaries. Thank you for coming and seeing us, and have yourselves a wonderful day.